Welcome to the Microscopists, a bite-sized bio podcast, hosted by Peter O'Toole, sponsored by Zeiss Microscopy. Today on the Microscopists.
Welcome to the Microscopists. Now, this is a very special edition focused on Latin American bioimaging, where the Latin community have come together. Now, this focuses Mariana De Niz.
Yeah, I've been doing microscopy for a long time now in the context of parasitic diseases, which I know is very big in York, by the way. And I also do outreach, so I'm quite passionate about scientific communication and the whole idea of, democratizing science, and that includes, showcasing and talking about the work that is done all over the world.
Leonel Malacrida.
I am the head of the Advanced Bioimaging unit. This is a joint initiative between the Universidad, República, where I own my associate professor position, and as well as the Institut Pasteur of Montevideo, which is part of the Institut Pasteur network. And since 2020, we launched this initiative here in Uruguay, trying to bring some new initiatives, some new technology for the country, but also for the region. And I have been involved since the foundation of Latin American Bioimaging, also in 2020.
And Andres Kamaid.
I always do some kind of disclaimer among this crowd, saying that I am not a microscopist, but I'm beginning to understand that I actually am, in a way. I use microscopy for a long time for tackling my questions, biological questions, and I found that it's the technology or the way to approach this that I love the most.
All in this episode of the Microscopists. Hi, welcome to this episode of the Microscopists. I'm Peter O'Toole from University of York, and today I'm joined by three special guests. So I'm joined by Mariana De Niz, Leonel Malacrida, and Kamaid. So actually, I'm going to get you to introduce yourselves first. That's a lot better than me doing it. So I'm going to start actually with Mariana. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. So I'm Mariana De Niz. I'm from Mexico, and I'm currently working in Chicago at Northwestern University at the Feinberg School of Medicine. I'm a member of the Center for Advanced Microscopy. And before that, I did my postdocs in France, in Portugal, and in the UK, mixed with the US. I've been doing microscopy for a long time now in the context of parasitic diseases, which I know is very big in York, by the way. And I also do outreach, so I'm quite passionate about scientific communication and the whole idea of, democratizing science, and that includes, showcasing and talking about the work that is done all over the world regarding science.
No, thank you. That was beautiful. That was really nice and succinct, by the way, and quite nomadic to have gone to so many places. I'll come to Leonel next. I'll go around my screen. Doesn't help those listening, but in my screen this makes sense. Leonel.
Hi, Peter. Thank you for the invitation. Well, I'm Leonel Malacrida. I'm from Uruguay. I am the head of the Advanced Bioimaging unit. This is a joint initiative between the Universidad, República, where I own my associate professor position, and as well as the Institut Pasteur of Montevideo, which is part of the Institut Pasteur network. And since 2020, we launched this initiative here in Uruguay, trying to bring some new initiatives, some new technology for the country, but also for the region. And I have been involved since the foundation of Latin American Bioimaging, also in 2020. And I am a microscopy, and I like to say that I'm more an spectroscopy doing imaging than a microscopy. But yes, I can call myself a microscopy.
But you're using the microscopy for your spectroscopy, so you're a yes. An spectrophotometric microscopist. I don't know what the best word would be. And Andre, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Hi, thank you, Peter. Thank you for the invitation as well. My name is Andres Kamaid. I was born in Uruguay and raised here, studied biology for some time and specialize in neurobiology. So I always do some kind of disclaimer among this crowd saying that I am not a microscopist, but I'm beginning to understand that I actually am, in a way. I used microscopy for a long time for tackling my questions, biological questions, and I found that it's the technology or the way to approach this that I love the most. So it has captivated my passion for a long time. And so I was trained as a neurobiologist, and then I moved to the United States also several times for studying my master's degree, then come back to Uruguay, then moved to Europe in Barcelona to do my PhD, where I switched to developmental biology. I mean, starting to understand the same biological questions, but in a different perspective of neurobiology. And then I moved to Mexico to work as a research assistant in the UNAM, in this University Nacional de Mexico, Autónoma. And in that time, I met Leonel Malacrida and Chris Wood in Mexico as well. And well, we're going to talk a bit, I guess, about the foundation of LABI. But it was then that I started to work very actively in something that I would call outreach in a way, but also build community. That I think it's one of the topics that we're going to be dealing with here. So, and I met Leonel, and then since then I joined the Institut Pasteur in Montevideo, and we've been working together for a few years, and here we are.
So you've all been quite nomadic in going around different countries and different continents even. And you've seen different facilities, how the infrastructures work to support science. It's interesting that only Mariana would actually say she's a hardcore microscopist, and two of you are being converted to microscopists or becoming comfortable in your skin that you're now microscopists. So Latin America bioimaging, LABI. So
we call it LABI.
LABI. So why LABI? Why Latin America bioimaging? Why not American bioimaging? America's bioimaging. Why Latin America bioimaging? Who'd like to take that answer?
Mm-hmm.
Go on, Andrew. Go on.
I can take that one, since I think I was in the very beginning of how this started, and you know very well that something called global bioimaging exists for some time, and bioimaging North America also exists. And so when I met Chris Wood some years ago, and he talked me about this. I didn't know, actually, to be honest. As I said, I was more focused. I mean, I was using microscopy, but I was not considering myself something that was my focus of research. So talking with Chris, he talked me about that, and I said, wow, that's interesting. And I asked the same question: is there a Latin American bioimaging? Because I knew other imaging societies, like the Society of Microscopy of some country, or the Inter-American Federation of Microscopy Societies, or things like that. So we started, and with the people of global bioimaging, they become very interested in having a bioimaging Latin America, or Latin American bioimaging, something that could bring together the people that shares a lot of things in common. We share a lot of things with all the world, especially talking about microscopy, but in terms of cultural identity, I think there is something quite unique to Latin Americans. And that's why, that's my perspective. I don't know if you guys want to add something else about that.
Yeah, Leonel, go on.
So if I can add, when we started this discussion with Andres and with Christopher Wood, we we understood that there was a need that was not filled by the academic society, right? The academic societies that were related to microscopy in Latin America, as well as in other parts in the world, were focused on the scientific aspect of the microscopy, right? In the developing of new technologies, in the application of the microscope. And as soon as we touched this interest of the global bioimaging, as well as Eurobioimaging and others, we identified that we lack of this kind of initiative in the region that can support not only the academic side, but also the broadening the opportunities, expanding the capabilities, and supporting the recognition and the career for many microscopists that are not strictly speaking scientists on different ways of evaluation or analysis that we have, right?
So it's interesting. Just you talk about the academic societies and the academic meetings, which are very scientific, question-led. So would you argue that LABE is there for the delivery of microscopy and the support of the delivery of microscopy across Latin America? Would you say that's what your main aim is to support that as a whole?
Yeah. I think. Let me tell you something that I think it's very interesting and it has to be with how we become like a new organization besides the ones that we already had. When we started talking about this, this was all like kind of catalyzed by a cooperation project that we can talk about later between Mexico and Uruguay. And we had this idea, but one of the things that we all agreed is that we need to see if this is something that we really need in the region. And I personally traveled to the SciSM meeting, which is a meeting of the biggest meeting in microscopy in our region that brings together also the North American societies of microscopy and Canadian. And we presented the idea of LABE in the General Assembly of SciSM. And say, I was invited by the people of CSM to say, okay, bring this idea and we'll talk about that. And there was a very good reception of the people in that assembly saying, okay, yes, this is something different that is dealing with other aspects that we're not, and that it would be very good to have in the region. I don't know if that kind of answers your question.
No, it does. And so why not make it Uruguay or Urexico? Because it's Mexico and Uruguay to start with. Why go so big to start with?
Well, I think we realized from the very beginning, and this is something that also relates of how we are approaching this. We realized that we need to, when we proposed this binational cooperation project, we said one of the main goals was to expand this to the whole region, because we strongly believe to all of us that we need that to really improve capacities in the whole region. There's not one single country or two countries that are going to be able to develop capacities in imaging alone, right? And there's so many good science, so much good science going on around us and very close to us, that we need to try to bring together that people.
Okay,
and, yeah.
I'm Mariana, you've traveled around Europe, America,
Africa as well, Asia as well.
So that would be interesting. So if you go to the UK, UK is pretty well kitted out. It's well networked. Yes. We've got the Royal Microscopical Society, we've got Bioimaging UK, we've got the network, we've got lots of equipment. So we can facilitate and do lots at the moment. Mariana, you've been to different European countries, and I presume each country has had similar capabilities. You're in America. Andres, you've been over to the States, similar equipment. Is it not the same back in Latin America?
I think if I can, so I left Mexico when I was about 15 or 16 years old. So it's been a while. But what I think is different in a way, and that's something that in the focal plane interviews that we've been doing, all of us together, is so going back to your question on Latin Americans, I think we have things that unite us in many ways. We have very similar history. We share languages. There's a cultural identity. Every country is different, but there's a lot that we share. But one of those things is the big brain drain, if you want to call it so. So many Latin Americans going abroad because there's more resources, less bureaucracies, it's easier to do research, etc. But this also, my feeling, my own and within the interviews, is we don't. So there might be capacities, and there's a tendency to try and collaborate, or for many years there's been a tendency to try and collaborate with the global north. Like you wouldn't even know, like, oh, they really have a whatever cryo-EM in Brazil. I didn't know that, and I went to my collaborator in France. So this is something I think there's it's for multiple reasons, but one of them is lack of awareness that the expertise exists in the region. And I see that's where it's different. So within Europe, which is where I did most of my career, there was this knowledge and this acceptance as well. Like we have a cryo-EM in whatever, I don't know, in France, and the people there have the expertise to support it, right? So I think both of these things are relevant to or what needs to be built up in Latin America, that we know that the experts are there, that we trust this expertise, and that we foster these collaborations in the region. That's my opinion, but I'm sure Leonel and Andres know more about this.
Yeah, I totally agree. I second.
Of course, I agree, and I want to say that I think you pointed to something that at least I saw very different in Latin America compared to Europe or the US, especially with Europe, where you have networking and networks actually working really well. That doesn't happen in any. I personally experienced in Mexico, for instance, that the disparities that exist and between different parts of the same country are huge. People do not even know in the same city what they are doing next to each other, or so it's very often what Mariana just said, that people collaborate with the global north, let's call it, because usually in Latin America you go and do a postdoc either in the US or Europe or Japan or a developed country, right? And you establish connections with that, and those connections become more stronger than the ones that you establish with your neighbors. And this is actually one of the main points why we why we are building this, to foster that connections among Latin American scientists, and also to do it in a different perspective. I mean, when you think about scientific societies, there is a kind of competitive aspect in science. Is competitive in many ways, and this is something that we are trying to change or to have in the very top of our heads. This LABI is a collaborative effort. It's not a competitive. So it's completely different framework. We are not gaining anything. We're not being paid for any of the things we're doing. So
what's in it for you? I was going to ask this question later, but you just said you're not being paid. What's in it for you? Why are you all doing it? I was going to start with Leonel on this one. Why are you doing this? Why are you involved? Why are you?
Well, for me, the answer is very simple and very straight. It's because after being some time outside, and going back to my country, I really wanted to support, the opportunity that I have outside the country that wasn't, available or open for many people in the country, but also in the region. So in my perspective, it's very romantic. So I wanted to come back. I wanted to come back and do things for me and for others, of course. But when you elaborate a little bit more in the answer, well, I think the big important point is, we always have chances to be better, in better situation, with better funding, with better capabilities, with, I don't know, etc. Larger equipment, whatever. But my position to that is, we can build on what we have, and I truly believe what Mariana said before is there are science and scientific people in Latin America which is really excellent, and they have the chance to go outside and write in different centers across the globe, and then they come back, and even with this limitation that we all know, we still have great science, and we still have the opportunity to approach and to tackle problems who are for or in Latin America, right? And I think this is what really motivated me. I really want to work in things who are involved in my everyday. So I work in the clinical hospital as well as in the Pasteur. And my problems came from the clinics. So I'm trying to solve and develop things who are, problems that my colleagues in the hospital ask me for help, So this is my more elaborated answer to you, Peter.
So would you say, if I'm going to condense that right down, that it's a sense of local, national, continental pride, that you don't want to go to Europe to work, you don't want to go into North America to work, you want to be in your home country and to help and develop? Is that, in a nutshell, about the right thing?
Yeah, you hit the center.
And is that the same for you, Mariana?
Yeah, so that's a very good question.
You're in Chicago at the moment, aren't you?
I'm in Chicago, yeah.
So why are you helping?
Because I'm Latin American. I have always, been. I will always consider myself Latin American, and I love my country and so on. So there are several things I wanted to add here. So one is, and which is something that we want to work towards with Labi as well. And I've been, I'm starting to get more involved in that, which is bringing, I'm going to also show the opinions of some of the people I've been interviewing, which is, recently I spoke to Carlos Bustamante, so his interview should be coming out soon. And he was saying, it's not bad to want to remain abroad if that's what you want to do. But I think we should make the most out of that. So we also cry and say, oh, the brain drain. But so he established a twin lab. His lab is in Berkeley, I believe, and he has a twin lab in Peru where this expertise is very easily bridged. And he was like, I don't understand why people are not doing it more. And it's something I would love to do. So, but as I said, I left when I was 16. I have like zero connections in Mexico when it comes to this, but it's something I would love to do as well. So he, something we discussed, him and I, was the choice, right? You choose to leave and this is fine, but how do you pay back to your region if that's what you want to do? It should be possible. Like you're not, you bailed out because you left. So this is in general. The other person I will quote now, also in general, whom I was really touched when she said this, which is why I left at some point, was Veronica Eisner, who is from Chile. And she said to me, so I was asking her, like, why are you building, what's your motivation to build the microscopy in your country? And she was like, because being able to do good research in your own country is a privilege. It's a privilege to be where your family is, where your friends are, where you grew up. Like, we shouldn't need to go abroad. Like, it's okay if you choose to, but it shouldn't be a need for you to do good science. And I want to build on that in my region and in my country. And so this is, I agree with all of these. And I think, I hope future generations don't have to make this choice where, I have found it tough to be abroad. There are many, it should be like, yeah, I want to go on an adventure rather than I need to be there if I want to such and such, right? So that's one thing. Can
I compare you, dare I compare you to a footballer who will go overseas because the opportunities, the big games are, I know the soccer in Latin America is very big, but you still want to go to your Real Madrids, your Barcelonas, your Manchester United, definitely. But I think the football players will go there, but most of them will want to return home when their career ends. And quite a lot of them set up foundations, charities, which is, I guess, a bit like the Twin Lab type philosophy, because they give back to where they were brought up, because they appreciate that's what gave them the opportunity to become that star footballer. And, you're star scientists. Yeah, and just like a football player, you go around as a commodity, using your skills, moving up the ladder. But one day you quite often want to go home, or at least enable other people there to develop where they're brought up. And I think, Mariana, that's what you just described yourself as Lionel Messi or someone.
No, I wouldn't dare. But the other thing is we don't. So first, I did understand when I was interviewing, for example, in Uruguay, everybody went back. Everybody I interviewed went back to Uruguay. I was like, this is not what I heard in Brazil or in Mexico, right? And then I started digging into, okay, what are the different realities? And for example, something that has come up in Mexico is just the level of violence in the country, right? So this is, for example, one thing that keeps me away. Like, I'm super happy being able to leave the lab here at 11 and reach home and be sure that I'm going to reach home. The level of violence, especially against women as well, in general, but to women. So these choices are choices, right? But it shouldn't be the access to science. So I'm all for democratic science. I think we should all be able to access everything and do the science we want to do. And as Veronica said, when I interviewed her, I almost cried when she said that. I was like, I would love to be where my family is doing the work I love to do.
I think science without borders is really critical. But the more we enable science to be done locally, the better it will be as well, because I think that helps society in general. Andreas, what about yourself? What's your motivation?
I'm probably the only one that can be barely compared to a footballer, because I came back when I was kind of old and retired and with belly, and this is what happens with footballers here. They come back to Uruguay when they cannot play more in the top leagues. And I know Leonel, for instance, he was in the best part of his career, being in the top, and he decided to come back. And it's interesting what Mariana said, and I think we talk about this with Leonel. I was here. I came a couple of years before he came back, and we talked about, while he was there, what's the best way to help. I mean, sometimes, and for me, it was for a long time. I spent almost 15 years abroad, and most of the time, I thought I was helping my country better being abroad than where I was at that time. It took me some time to realize that I can now be doing something as I expected to be changing the reality in my country and region. But for a long time, I thought I was giving more being outside for different reasons, personal reasons and scientific reasons as well.
So I'm going to switch a little bit now. How many different countries does LABI represent? How many different countries do you have members of LABI from?
Okay, that's a good question. It's actually, we have 7 countries participating actively in the executive committee, but I think we had like 17 actually with people registered as participants. So it's more participants than actually formal representation.
So I was going to ask, what do each of you think is the biggest challenge that you have? And I'm going to start though. It's a huge space, to travel from think about your extremes of distance of your members. has anyone got an idea of how far away that is, or even just how far by aeroplane that would be to travel from those extremes?
More than 20 hours, probably, no?
Yeah, but very often people doesn't realize about that, Peter. I mean, when I was living, yeah, I mean, when you invite people to come to Uruguay, very often for meetings or things like that, and especially from the US, they say, okay, they think it's okay. They go to Mexico, it's a couple of hours flight, 3-4 hours, and then you don't expect it. If I want to go to where you are, it would take me at least 19 hours by plane. So it's huge, and it's a big challenge. In reality, sorry, Lionel, but the diversity of those. I was talking in Vina meeting, the diversity of the cultural diversity, even though we have a lot of commonalities in our cultural identity. I mean, it's also very, very diverse. I think it's after Africa is probably the most diverse region of the world. So in terms of language, for instance. So
Leonel, you were going to say.
No, I was just trying to comment that, if I have to visit Mariana in Mexico, or some of the colleagues we have in Mexico, the difference in time to get into, I don't know, Irvine, California, where I did my postdoc, is probably 2 hours. So it's 15 hours to DF, Mexico, and 2 hours, 3 hours more to Irvine, California. So it's really, really, really far. And this is always a handicap that we have to overcome when we have to attend to meetings, when we have to go to collaboration, when we have to travel for everything. And for me in particular, this is a boost. It's something that really put me in the positive way, not in the negative way. I will do it anyway.
I remember. Where was it? I was looking somewhere and just thinking, my goodness, in one country it takes longer. I could fly to the south, to the north, to the south, to the north of the UK, probably 7-8 times in the time it takes to travel the width of Brazil. It's just nuts in the distance. So it's one of the challenges. You said you got 7 on the exec. You got different, presumably trying to set up nodes or hubs in different areas. You're going to have that because people can't even afford to travel necessarily to those hubs. And is that the biggest it's wow. The problems you are going to have, the challenges you are going to have are on a different scale because of geography, because of the finances. So that's what I would see as the enormity, I think.
I would imagine, sorry.
Yeah, Mariana, please.
Yeah, no, I would imagine so. I'm probably the least experienced of the three of us here in that respect. But speaking again from everything I've heard during the interviews I've done and what I've seen, is also as Leonel and Andres were saying, the realities of the countries, they pose challenges on their own. So what happens, some instability at the government level. I don't want to say names of what problems and so on. So as I move across regions and people say what the historical and social and political context is, and many say, so now imagine trying to do science and looking at so I usually ask the question, where do you see science going in the next 10 years? And so many have answered, I don't know where it's going tomorrow, right? We don't know what's happening with this government tomorrow. What do I know about 10 years? So I think a challenge to that, and in addition, now travel across countries, go to a conference, or somebody again was saying, yeah, we're trying to make a conference, and then there's a dengue outbreak, and then there's a coup, and then there is, malaria outbreak. So it's a very complex scenario. Where indeed people are trying to do science when all of this is happening in the background. I would imagine this is another thing of challenges, but I don't know, again.
I think that's across most continents. I think, look at Europe at the moment. It has its challenges. Africa has its challenges. We've lost collaborators in Sudan. Well, not lost them; they're there, but we can't carry on those collaborations with Sudan because they've closed down at the moment. So it happens everywhere. If I was to ask you, what is your target? What is your medium term, your 5-year and 10-year target? What do you want it to look like from the bioimaging perspective? Because even if you're not if you're not a microscopist, for the world of genomics, for the world of mass spec, for the other technologies that underpin all the life sciences, and I would even put the electron microscopes for the material scientists. They've got their technologies as well. You are trailblazers here in the region. So where you want to be, others can follow that type of thing. And I think, do you have a 5-year goal and a 10-year goal of how you want it to look? And what is that? I don't know who's best to ask first. So if someone gives me the 5-year, someone else could give me the 10-year, and then the other one can tell me why it's not going to happen. What the real problems are.
If I can take on that, Peter, and connect with the previous one, because I think something that we are working on elaboration of what you ask about, if we are thinking in cuáles, centers, strategic centers in different places in Latin America in order to communicate and coordinate. Well, indeed, we are working in that way. The main idea of connecting the people that we already have in the lobby is with this aim. Then we need to elaborate on how we are going to build these regional hubs, these regional centers that can be connected and can be well communicated. But we are.
How would they be connected? They're obviously not physically connected. So how are they connected? How are these nodes actually connected? How are they working together?
Well, in particular now, we have grants in order to achieve that goal. We just kick off a grant the past April here in Montevideo, which is a regional and bi-regional, because it's not only connect the people who are involved in LABI, but some others too in Latin America with Europe and with several countries with Europe. And in particular, we are trying to tackle a problem, which is we eventually may have, the technology, or we may have the opportunity of, access to certain technology, but we lack of the, human capacities. And what we are now trying to reach first is to, grow the human capacities in the different centers in a very, synergetic way. Not Andres was mentioned about not to compete. We are developing a center here in Uruguay who has a focus, but in Buenos Aires there are, and in Argentina there are some other with other focus, and in Chile others, and in Mexico, and in Peru, in Brazil. So our goal is to build up on what we have, in the know-how that we have, and eventually not all the center will have all the expertise and all the technologies, but we will be well connected in order to provide the access and expand the access for everyone. And we have a second grant now under evaluation, also in collaboration with European Union collaborators, and all of them are in the same way, in the same logic, trying to build up from what we have already and try to do the next step, which is, okay, now we know, we have the know-how, we have the knowledge of where are the different opportunities, and then we provide access to everyone.
And do you think the access, because obviously there's some samples, Mariana, you mentioned parasites, immunological research of parasites, they don't travel very well.
No.
So do you see collaborations, academic collaborations being developed because, they'll go to the microscopy, say, I want to do this, and say, we can't, but actually over in Mexico they can, or in Chile they can, or in Argentina they can. And so then they will, hopefully the academics can then find collaborators so that they can prep those samples to do that scientific study. Do you see that happening?
I think it's already on the way. So I know that, for example, in Brazil, it's precisely this idea. I'm just familiar with Brazil right now, but they're trying to decentralize this and to build a hub in which precisely what you're saying, that being such an enormous country, not just in terms of pathogens, but also plants and so on that shouldn't be moved around for ecological reasons or so on, that it would be great to have, say, an important center that is fully equipped and fully with all the capacities in the Amazon, for example, and being able to do it there rather than travel all the way down to Rio de Janeiro or to Sao Paulo. I think that's already happening.
And wouldn't it be great then if you had the US, the Canadian, the European PhDs, postdocs, wanting to spend 3 years at the source of those pathogens, whether it be human or plant, instead of trying to replicate it back then? Actually, it's the opposite way, isn't it? To how it is at the moment. It brings through because then they're close and you get a feel for the samples. Do you know what's great about this? For me, technology is what brings people together. It's what enables science. And I think Mariana, I think that idea of just having the technology that can solve all those problems that have been asked and being researched in Europe, North Americas, it makes a lot of sense to go to where the disease, the parasites, the pathogens actually are, because it's much safer and environmentally much better. And the impact is where it matters quite often.
This is probably the next step, Peter, because what we need next is to establish, these local capacities in order to tackle the question that we have in place and not travel, because there are, as you say, there are things that you cannot travel, right? And this is basically the fundamental claim of the stabilization of these centers, these hubs in the region that can concentrate not only the technology, but the most important thing is the know-how, how you take a better advantage of the technology that we have or we will acquire in the future. Because as we all know and we all agree, we always have limitation of funding. So we need to really support a case if you want to buy a cryo-electron microscope, because it, of course, is more than $1 million. So any country, even Brazil, which has 700 electron microscope, will have to justify why it needs a cryo-electron microscope. And I think this is exactly what you say. But in another part, we also need to take advantage of the opportunities we have to collaborate between regions. And I think this place has the opportunity to support local and regional people to maturate, the project in order to then reach to the next level in the other opportunities they have. We can elaborate our project at the level where is, fair to go to your place or go to, Chanilla or go to MBL to test the next hypothesis, right? Because we will never have all the instrumentation.
No, this is the next challenge. How do you get it funded?
Mm-hmm.
Where's the funding come from? Because, you're in different countries. So it's not like the EU, which the UK is not there at the minute, but let's dodge that one. The EU has common funding, so countries can work together because there's one funding pot. I don't think that exists in Latin America, does it?
No, it doesn't. And this is a big problem in that respect. And one of our biggest challenges is to maintain sustainability. Currently, we are being funded by the CCI Foundation initiative.
So who's the CZ? For those who are not familiar with CZI, that is
the Chance Zuckerberg initiative. They gave us a funding. The initial funding, I would say, it was from this binational cooperation project of Uruguay and Mexico. That's government money that those two countries put together for social cooperation or international cooperation. Those kind of funds exist in many directions within Latin America, but that was the initial funding. And then the Chance Zuckerberg initiative, they gave us a 3-year grant for us to being able to develop the network. So that's the funding right now. In terms of practical, it comes to the Institut Pasteur in Uruguay, but we have one person working for the network, which has helped us a lot to really make it work, because that's necessary. There's a big challenge also to make the people understand that to keep this working is not only our work, because we are not being paid or recognized for this, and so it's a double effort and very often not well recognized. And so it's very important to have professional aid in that, and we're having it now for 3 years. And one of the next big challenges, on top of the ones you mentioned before, is that one. How do we get funded to continue with this? We have ideas, but nothing sure yet.
I will challenge back on one bit. I would say it is helping your recognition. You say you get nothing back, you don't get the recognition. I think that maybe that's financial or within your... But that will come because your international reputations are growing. I wouldn't have known about you if it wasn't for the initiative. And I think a big shout out to Chan Zuckerberg and their funding streams, because it does fund slightly differently to how the other foundations fund. And for those who don't know Chan Zuckerberg, this is essentially Facebook are sponsoring these initiatives. Social media is an all-important part. And I'm sure actually social media, whether that be Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, whichever, must play a big part in your communications to make people aware. Because I guess the next challenge is to make people aware that this is actually happening, because it's such a big area. Some microscopy labs do you think there's some that haven't heard of you yet across Latin America?
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Many people doesn't know. Yeah.
So how can we reach them? Come on, how can we reach them? What is everyone who's watching this or listening to this now? What do they have to do to help you reach those corners that you haven't reached yet?
Well, first of all, you can go to our webpage, log in and register themselves. So everybody will be, receiving our monthly newsletter and every information related to Latin American bioimaging.
So I have to ask, and maybe we could get something more clearly. What is the web address, and do you have a Twitter handle?
Yeah.
Because you need people to share that Twitter handle, that web. So you need people not just to go to the site, but then to share it and to tell their friends about it, not just in Latin America, because if it's someone in Europe look at Mariana, you're now up in Chicago. But if you were to tweet about it, it's going to reach colleagues in other parts of, your pathogen biologists that will then pass it on. So what is your Twitter handle?
Right now it's Latam Bioimaging. That's the Twitter handle, LATAM Bioimaging, and the website is exactly the same, LATAM bioimaging.org. But that's going to be changing soon, because what part of the support from CCI was devoted to actually make a professional website. So in a couple of months, that would be looking different. And so it's extremely important to help to spread the word. I think that's, and this, what you're doing, Peter, we thank you very, very much, because I think help us reach an audience that it's very important. I'm sure many Latin Americans even will find out about LABI thanks to this. So thank you very much for that. And you do not have to be Latin American to be registered and to help if you want. So, and to participate, this is, so far it's open to anyone that can participate and share information, share resources, get connected with people, which is one of the main goals, to connect people and to get.
I wanted to add also, sorry, yeah. No, part of the joint efforts in a way. So that's how I got into contact with Leonel and with Andres, is precisely. So someone who has been helping us out is the company of biologists. They gave us, through Focal Plane, they gave us a platform for the interview. So the idea, it started with, well, let's like how do you say this? So raise awareness and talk about the careers and the paths and the work that is being done by Latin American scientists, both in Latin America and abroad. And now, I mean, we wish to incorporate similar efforts also through, so it's, you know, many of the people that have been interviewed are part of LABI. And the idea is the same well, now I want to make it 1,000 voices from Latin America and then continue with that. So because it's such an enormous region, just doing 10 interviews per country, it's a 5-year project in the timeline that they asked me to stick to in Focal Plane, which was 1 interview per week. But if we do it 1,000, then that's 15 years. So, you know, the idea is just it's part of those efforts. So we want to do things also via LABI, and I think we're meeting sometime soon to talk about that outreach. But I feel the campus of Focal Plane is giving us that, so it's reaching a different audience as well, right? It's both Latin in the region, but abroad as well. And yeah, so far the feedback has been really good in that sense.
I take what you say. Yeah. Sorry, Andres. I take what you say, Peter, and I think we have to knock the door. We still have to knock the door. We need to go to meetings outside of LABI meetings outside of you know, our, you know, space of comfort, and go and say, we are LABI, we are here to do this, and explain. We are still in this step of the growing of LABI.
So I think this is an important point, actually, because it's not microscopists you do need to talk to microscopists and reach out to them, because you're still at an early stage, you're only 3 years in, but you also need to reach the end users. But it's through the end users, you're probably going to meet the funders, the people who have the money. And I'm not just talking about the Chan Zuckerbergs. I'm talking about the governmental funders, and getting them to understand the importance of the infrastructure and how the infrastructure attracts the best scientists. The infrastructure stops the best scientists leaving because they have it on their doorstep. That's a really important message. And not all politicians will necessarily understand that straight away. So championing funders is one of the most difficult tasks, but at the same time, one of the most important tasks. So the more noise you make, the better the chances you will actually start reaching that. But I don't know if you have a plan of how you can do that, because that is not simple.
We will be discussing that with you in person in September, hopefully, because that's why we meet. We have these discussions online, but I think we are still in the phase that we need to identify the key steps that we need to take to actually make this work useful.
But if I can add to this also, Peter, you know, within this grant that we were spoken before about cooperation between Europe and Latin America, some of the things that we want to produce is not just, you know, the training or the, you know, acquiring of better practices in one thing or another. It's also to produce, you know, documentation that can support and can help to, you know, policymakers and, you know, funders, specifically of, you know, government, how important is bioimaging, how important this is a consortium that not only include bioimaging, it's also structural biology. The two communities are now very, very close, because, you know, bioimaging take a big role now in structural biology by all related to cryo-electron microscopy and many other techniques. So we are convinced that in that way, we share force between the two, you know, big networks, and we will be able to generate the opportunities in terms of funding that not exist already, right?
I think it's quite, Europe is UK, I think is in an exceptional place. Really exceptional. Europe is in a good place, generally. It's interesting that Bioimaging North America is in its infancy to an extent for networking the bioimaging microscopists. Obviously, they've got the material side is pretty well looked after, and the electron. The light microscopy is only I would say now coming together better, more collectively as a continent. So you're not alone. And obviously with Africa Bioimaging is also has its challenges. And I think your challenges are different to what they have. What courses, what events, what sorts of things are you doing what are you delivering? Are you delivering courses, conferences, networking meetings? Give me an example of some of the things you're doing at the moment.
So one of the main tasks, I mean, for instance, we're building a platform for communication and to have a channel of communication. This is something very important. And in terms of, we do not organize courses, but now we have training programs that support people to travel from one place to another in Latin America, also outside. For instance, we have now someone visiting Janilia Farm laboratories to get trained and to see how they handle a top-class facility. But we also have someone traveling from Colombia to Chile to have access to a certain equipment that they do not have in Colombia. So this is the main actions, deliverables that we have so far. It's those training programs, just to help people get trained at different levels, not only as users or access to equipments, but also for facility staff, to learn how to run a facility, to exchange experiences about that and implement changes and to cooperate.
Right. Mariana, were you about to say something?
No, I was listening.
I was going to say, I would, and I spoke to Chris Wood about this recently, setting up a course, even if it's in the basic, not the most advanced technologies, just confocal, for example, because it's fairly common. If you were to run a course and get those students back on an annual basis to then share what they've done with it to the next cohort, you will develop a network of Latin bioimaging scientists, researchers, not microscopists per se, but researchers using it that will actually really strengthen the environment. EMBL have done that exceptionally well. But a course is a very good nucleus to start those networks and if you can bring them back together and glue them, they won't all stay. Some will go off in different ways, but that's how the net works. And instead of having to then go off to collaborators in Chicago or wherever else, in Pasteur, Paris, or wherever else it is, you'll have those networks within Latin America. And that could be start the
We're
course.
working on that idea, and actually some of those courses already exist. And what we're doing is to provide help to Lavi. So far, the funding that we have allow us to help people exploit what is already being done, because we do have. I mean, sometimes what the problem is that not everyone can. We do not have the funds to make it international, let's say, but we do have very high quality local courses, and some of them we didn't even know until we started to work together, so this is, but and we are working, having putting the people together to organize such a course. It was one of the idea for a proposal for CCI, but we didn't have time to make it.
So we have 3 minutes or 2 minutes left. Leonel, you were going to say something first, and I've got some very quick.
No. Just very quick, what you say is very similar to this idea of train the trainers. And this is something that really changed my mind in terms of training. We started last year with our, unit doing this kind of approaches. And it's really amazing because you generate what you say, you generate a community of people who is involved, and it's amazing. I totally endorse what you say.
Guys, you need to come on our course. Send them up to Europe. We've had people from Uruguay, Argentina, Brazil, Chile. They've all come to Europe, and then we'll train them to send them back. But on a more serious note, before some very quick questions at the end, one thing that I think maybe the listener doesn't fully appreciate, we're very fortunate again in Europe or in North America, in that the commercial companies that supply the instruments can loan them in relatively easy. They're being made within the region. We can talk directly to them very easily. Is that the same in Latin America?
Oh, it's very difficult, Peter. Maybe in Mexico, because it's closer to north, it's better. But at the south, it's very difficult to receive even a demo, because you have to overcome many barriers of energy. First of all, you need to move equipment from very far, and second, you have a lot of costs associated to the movement of the demo. For instance, if you want to bring a demo to Uruguay, you need to deposit an amount of money equal of the cost of the instrument to get in the instrument in the country. So it's a guarantee. So it is very, very difficult. There are companies who are even willing to do it because they completely support this initiative, and we need to make it work. It's not easy.
And I know I'm mindful, and this is not why Zeiss do this, but I am mindful that Herbert Schaden certainly and Zeiss have been very supportive of these
very
initiatives,
much
and in Africa as well.
We make it work once. We make it work once last year with Imaging Latin America, which was a specific meeting, course workshop co-organized with Leon Chu from Chanilla Research Campus. It was in Uruguay, and we received 24 students from all over Latin America, and Zeiss supported with a demo. It was fantastic. It was the first time that I experienced this in my career.
And here we are at York. Zeiss will do that every time because it's on the doorstep. It's such a contrast. I think that's what I want the listener, the viewer, to understand is
the cost for
easy. The complexity for yourselves is
beyond the demos or things like that. Beyond for normal functioning of equipment, technical visits. I mean, we do. I mean, if for many things. If you want a technical expert, it would be in Sao Paulo, for instance, or there's one in Sao Paulo only, or one and it takes for ages for them to come, and it's really, really expensive. I mean, they put together like 3 or 4 visits in the region to come, so you have to wait for a long time. That's one of the things with Herbert, for instance, we have been discussing how can we improve that, and how can LABI work together to serve as a united voice for the problems of the community, because we share the same problem with people, and sometimes we do not coordinate things, and we pay a lot of money and it's a duplication of efforts for everyone, even for the companies. So.
Yeah, and it's not just a Zeiss problem. And actually, this is where the companies need to work together, I think, to help find those solutions, to make it cost effective and to make it more productive. So we are beyond the hour, so I apologize, but I'm going to ask very quickly, where's the next meeting?
Mexico, Cuernavaca, nearby Cuernavaca. It's the state of Morelos, September. You'll be there, I hope.
I'm coming.
Yes.
And my next question, if you could choose anywhere in Latin America to have a meeting, where would it be? I'm going to start with Mariana.
Oh, Galapagos Islands.
Oh, I'm definitely going to that one. Leonel.
I would have it here in Uruguay. not because I'm lazy, because I really like our country.
Andres?
Yeah, I would go for Ecuador, which is a country that has a negligibly community so far. So try to support the people that are pushing there.
A meeting in Quito, that'd be okay. So the next final question: What is the, I'm going to start with you. This has to be really quick. Best Latin American country, Andres.
Oh, Mexico for me.
Leonel.
Probably I would say Argentina in science speaking. Argentina in science speaking is one of the big country.
You're going to get deported now, Mariana.
No,
I think that's an impossible question. I mean, Mexico is my home where my family lives, but I think all of them are amazing. I couldn't choose.
You'll all make good politicians, which is why you're representing bioimaging in Latin America so brilliantly well. I'm going to say thank you to everyone who's listened to this version of the Microscopists. There's also a special version for bioimaging North America coming. There's one from Africa already out there. They are all very different people, different challenges. All of you, I think you're doing an amazing job. And, I hope everyone globally helps to develop as well. It's a global effort because we can all share best practices. I think that's really important. So, Leonel, Mariana, Andres, thank you very much today.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you,
It's
Peter.
very important for us. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Microscopists, a bite-sized bio podcast sponsored by Zeiss Microscopy. To view all audio and video recordings from this series, please visit bitesizebio.com/the-microscopists.